Welcome everyone to the Game Dev Discussion Podcast. This is episode 53, and we've got a returning guest, and I suppose third time's the charm because Josh Lynch is back. How are you doing, dude?
Good. How are you, man? I'm here for the hat trick.
I'm good, man. I'm good, man. I've I've been wanting to have you back on for a while. So for everyone, I suppose there's some context to this. Josh, you tweeted a few months back
It's dangerous.
about
Don't do that, guys. Don't
don't
tweet.
tweet. Oh god, yeah. You're literally rolling the dice.
I'm just kidding.
Uh, so you tweeted about some shower thoughts. I'm going to paraphrase here, but it's essentially about the troubles seniors sometimes face. You know, the career choices they have to make. And as soon as you tweeted that, I know I got in contact with you, and I was like, I need to get you back on a podcast because this is an interesting topic that I've wanted to talk about for a long time. And I was like, you're the perfect person to talk about it. So for everyone listening, I guess that's some context to this conversation and what the thought behind all this. So where's the best place to start? I guess. What's the transition been like for you? You've now I suppose that's a good place to start. You're now a principal artist. Before you were like it's like a expert artist, something like
Yeah.
that.
No. So yeah. So like right now, I'm a principal artist here over at Probably Monsters,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like super stoked on it. It's been going really good. And before that, yeah, I was a senior staff
That's it.
environment artist with a specialty in materials. I guess is like how you wanted to frame it. And then prior to that, I was the lead material artist on the Division 2. And then, senior before that. So, yeah.
Well, so that's some context. What do we think then? So let's just sort of start with the really high level overview of it. Senior artists, let's just generally speaking, I know you get like senior staff artists, and then you've got like other studios have like experts, but let's just seniors in general. There's a kind of a bit of it, I suppose. They come to a crossroads and like they kind of plateau to a point where if they want to progress in their career, they kind of have to make a leap into three types of roles. You've got principal artist, lead artist, and I suppose you could say the like associate art director type route, which some people have gone. Now, the reason I think we're talking now is because it's kind of they're three wildly different jobs to what makes you a good senior. And
Yeah.
if you want to progress in your career, you're like, okay, you're doing like you're very to be a good senior, you're like you have to be very unidimensional in your career. Like you're very good at your thing. To then, oh, I want to progress in my career still, leapfrog into this completely different type of career, like a lead artist, for example. You're more of a manager,
Yeah.
principal artist. It's like it's just such a big leap, and it's like to me that's a problem that you can't keep being the thing that you're great at. The reason you're a senior and the reason you get to that point in the first place is because you're a great artist. It's
Yeah.
almost like you've got to sacrifice that in order to do these other jobs and keep progressing in career. To me, that's a problem. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's just me though.
No, yeah. So like that tweet, um, like I like, I'm pretty honest about stuff, about how I feel. And I speak to things because I know I'm not alone. Like I'm not the only one thinking about this, and I'm not the only one that's had I've had multiple conversations about this with people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the tweet was basically like, around the 10-year mark, I don't feel like the game industry does a good job with talent after that. Um, that's not to like, like throw major shade at like all the studios or something. I just think it's something that's important to me that um, like when you get to that point, you start to look around and you get a job and you're like associate level. You start, then you get mid, and then you get senior, and then before you know it, there's not really a lot of progression left, right? As you mentioned, and then
Mm.
the way you progress becomes very very narrow. And depending on the studio, you might not get a lot of support. I think it's you also have the aspect of like, you know, keeping up with new tools and workflows gets harder as your life changes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then that leadership role, there comes a lot of managing and mentorship expectations with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just because you're a good senior doesn't mean you're going to be a really good lead right away, right? And so, right or wrong, some people are thrown into that and then they get like a really bad taste in their mouth if it doesn't go well and they never want to touch it again. They're not trained, right? Like when
Mm-hmm.
you're an associate or mid-level artist or even a senior, you have somebody like really mentoring you, right? Like you have a lot of people you can
Yeah.
look to follow in their footsteps. And I think just as you get higher up, it becomes a little more narrow and difficult. It's like there's less air up there. You know what I mean? That whole thing.
Yeah, like that's such a good way to describe it, as less air up there. Because when you talk about like you progress through like associate, mid, senior, this is like I was trying to work out why this happens. Like
Yeah.
what leads to this, and how is it fixable, and why is it not fixable? And one of the things I think it might be down to is you could progress through to senior within in under 10 years and quite easily. You know, it's quite a linear and quick process between junior to mid and then mid to senior. Like it's almost like a given. Like when you're a junior, you're just going to be a mid. You stick around for a year, you're going to be a mid.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. It's like
and
if you just do a good job and right. Yeah. Yeah.
so maybe part of it is that them initial two jumps happen in such quick succession. And
Oh yeah.
this is a huge overhaul in like this suggestion is like overhauling the whole structure of a company. But
Yeah.
maybe juniors like seniors should be made more not elite, but like, you know, it's a lot harder to get there. And it's not something that you just accrue over time. Like some studios, if you just stick around for, 5 years, you're gonna be a senior.
Yeah.
And rather than have it be something where it's like an additive issue, being a junior to mid, like, you know, it's a longer period of time that you're in that space, and then it's a longer period of time that you're in mid. Therefore, when you get to a senior, it's like, okay, this is you're there a little bit later in your career, and B, because there's fewer seniors at that point. If you go with this methodology, you potentially, you could get paid more. I suppose the issue then is if you're junior for longer, you get paid less for longer. So like that needs adjusting too. But that's why. So that I think that's where the issue kind of starts. Now there's a ton of stuff, like I said, that happens later on. Like for example, being a lead and being a good manager is an extremely challenging thing. I know we spoke last night about this. That
Yeah. Oh yeah.
having a good manager, oh my god, like people like we said last night, people bag on managers, and it's like until you've had a good manager, you do not appreciate managers.
Yeah. For sure,
It's
man.
it's nuts.
Yeah. I think yeah, I want to kind of go back to something you said, man, about like the time it takes. I don't know a good answer to that. I just know that
Mm. Yeah.
I can speak to what I've gone through and like
Hmm.
that it just seems pretty
Quick.
when you're in it, it doesn't seem quick, but when you look back, you're like, oh, that's pretty quick. Like this is supposed to be my career. Like I'm going to be so many years old, hopefully doing this, you know?
Mm.
And like, yeah, I don't know if the industry's so young, right? That it just hasn't had time to develop the roadmap for that for talent, right? But it is
Um,
something that I definitely think that a lot of the people, you know, it's funny. Like after I tweeted that, I had a lot of people like message me, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I got like, you know, when I was junior or mid, I was like barely making any money, and it wasn't until I finally got senior that I was like I felt comfortable, right, in terms of their pay scale, right."
yeah, yeah.
And so I find that really interesting as well. Like I don't know what that means, but
I think
it's
that
worth
comes down
mentioning
to
that I got a lot of feedback about it, I guess.
so. I suppose there's two parts to that. The
Yeah.
first part, when you said about the industry being, I think that is actually a big part of it because I was looking at like lawyers, like how they're structured, and it's like people spend like as an associate up until your early 30s
Yeah.
training as an associate. And then, once you become like just a firm lawyer, it's about, your 30s and your 40s. If you're making partner, and like this is the equivalent, I suppose, like leads and principals,
Right.
you don't even get near that until your late 40s, normally. So you can see how, like, in a lawyer's career path, it's super stretched out. Like you said,
Right.
though, like at the moment, you can make it to the end point before 30 if you start young.
That's what I
Um,
mean, right? Like you could be 18, not go
exactly.
to an art school or any kind of college, university. You could just be really good at your job. You're really good at putting environments together and making characters. You get a job, and like from there, you're 10 years in, and then you're not even 30 yet, maybe, or you just hit 30, and then you're there.
Hmm. It's and it's like it's such a big. And what I mean is, when I say it's a big problem, I don't mean like it's this terrible thing. I mean, it's so hard to fix. Like, it's just how. I mean, where do you start and fix that? Okay, all you mids out there, we're gonna put you back down to junior. Like, where
Yeah,
where did this start? And the first junior comes in, you say, right, now we're gonna change the culture. We're gonna do this. This new junior comes in, like, now feels um like alienated because, like, oh, why am I being made a junior for so long? Like,
right.
I fixing this problem is so difficult. I don't understand how to do it. And when you mentioned about the pay, obviously, now I've always said that junior artists are grossly underpaid for their skills, given how hard it is to get into the industry and like how good you need to be. I've
Yeah,
always said that, when you compare it to another comparative skill of, training required and skill required, I'm like, it's bad anyway. But there is also, like, I feel like this is something I've only just recently noticed, because there's such a discrepancy in countries' pay. What the US pays versus what the EU pays versus what Sweden pays. I'm like, I'm freelancing at the moment for Counterplay, like contracting.
yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna struggle to ever leave contracting, because there's just such a gross difference between um like the salaries in America versus the UK for equal roles. It's like, if I ever wanted to step down and, well, not step down, but like work in the UK, it's a massive, massive pay cut. And I think part of that is what's going to lead to, this is like part of leads into the problem of, the variability between studios. Like we sort of said, is, a lead in one place is not a lead in another place. One place they want you to be as manager. It's like, that's it. Your job is to manage artists. In another studio, it's more old school, and they want you to be more like a principal artist. So, I mean, is that something that, do you think that actually contributes to the problem, or do you think it's just an inevitability?
Uh, Sorry. So you mean like splitting out the roles between principal and senior?
Yeah, and it's the standardization across the studio, like across the industry, because it doesn't feel like people are playing the same game, if that makes
Oh, I
sense.
see. Yeah, sorry, I didn't get you there for a second. Yeah, totally, man. Yeah, I think it's a little tough, right? Like, when I do my career coaching calls, I talk to people about that. Like, just because one studio is going to want, um, like, well, let's say you're applying, right? And they're going to behave a certain way or have certain expectations, and then another is going to be completely different. So I think
Hmm.
it definitely does. I think a lot of studios I've been at, like, um, they'll split out, like, after you go to senior, you go to, maybe every studio is going to call it something different, right? It's going to be expert, advanced, staff. It's one level above senior, but below principal. And then
Hmm.
after that, you have principal, and then after that, you have like your lead role. Um, and then after that, it's like very few roles, right? But one thing I always
Yeah.
thought would, like, um, I don't, I really would like to see studio, uh, like, kind of structure, like you get so high up as an artist that you're like a craft, you know what I mean? Like you're like a craft expert. Like it's like
Hmm.
you're on the same level. um, as somebody like really high up, or you have a lot of talent, but you don't want to be a manager, but you want to offer, you know, your skill set and your ability to mentor people, but it's just like it keeps growing, right? Like that's to me just another tier that could be offered.
So say so on like one tier you have
Yeah,
lead artist, principal, and associate art director. Say that's like they're all equal tiers, just for
yeah,
argument's sake. You're saying have another tier, another person in that mix who is a craft expert. So say for example, just for because we're both material artists, the
yeah,
materials
sure,
expert,
yeah,
and that person is he still creates materials. He still teaches people. He is still an artist, but he is the go-to authority on materials. Like, you know, the lead, their job is to manage the tasks and make sure everything's running smoothly.
right,
The associate art director, making sure everything looks, you know, the correct way. Principal of designing the overall pipelines and maintaining a quality. You'd rely on your craft experts to be um, making sure everybody doing that job is in the know on how to do it,
right,
make sure it's up to a certain quality. So
yeah,
how
like
in that world though, how many of them would there be? Like, is it just if someone of that particular skill is available to the studio, or is it we need like a materials one, we need a high poly one, we need a weapons one. Like,
yeah, I mean,
how
I
does that
guess
look
it
like?
depends on the studio, right? Like that's like that's what gets so weird about it is like it depends. Um, but I definitely think that like something like that could be really cool. You know, maybe that person is uh, you know, very good at training or seeking
Mm,
out workflows, and they spend a lot of time doing R&D or something. You know what I mean? Like I know some other places they have that. Like they have like a small team that is like uh, more experimental, and they're like
yeah,
out there like spearheading things.
almost like an
Uh,
R&D team.
yeah,
Oh, I see what you're talking about then. So like they're the ones who are on the cutting edge, trying to work out the next way to do things. So
yeah,
rather than so if we're talking about like or like what you did when you first introduced designer to your studio, like they're the ones finding the next
right,
thing to introduce
yeah,
to the pipeline.
right.
That's interesting. Do you
Like
think
they're pretty integral to the health and modernization of a studio,
mhm,
because a lot of people do that right now, but they do it at home. It's not their
yeah.
job, right? So I think it could be really cool to see that.
Mm. I was wondering, like, no, I'm putting my studio head on now. I can just
No, it's
imagine the
cool. Yeah.
response. Can you imagine a response where you suggest that, like, hey, these people, they're doing their own time. Like, maybe we should like get them in house doing this for us. Yeah, but then that eats into the budget, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh god, like
Yeah.
it's such a
It's
to an
tough
artist, I feel like
conversations,
it's
man.
super. Yeah, to an artist, I feel like it's self-explanatory. Hey, they're gonna push the edge of what we can do and make us the next best thing. And to an artist, that's like super, like that's self-explanatory. To anybody else, I can imagine just how that conversation goes. You want to just have this person just do research all the time? Like he's a great artist, give him production. No, he can just do production. That's fine. It's like
Right.
no, but he might be better. To, like he's got the brain to work out the next big thing. No, 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 no. We haven't got time for that. We're in crunch time. Just do production.
Yeah, I think
And
yeah, it's going to really yeah, it's going to really depend on the wants of the studio, like how big the team is and all that stuff.
well, interesting. This brings me on to my next point. So the
Yeah.
people who do that, and we're going to call them just the hustlers, the ones who, in their own time, they're very career driven. They want to get better. They want to go further.
Yeah.
Um, and they're the sort of people we're talking about at the moment. The people who get to senior and they're like, no, I want to keep climbing. I want to keep getting better.
Right.
Um, they're the ones who, like we just said, are in their own time, learning, developing. That's why they get to probably senior and they're in the position to jump into these other roles because they're the ones pushing their own boundaries.
Right.
Now, I used to be quite pig-headed about this, and it's more, as I work with different people, I'm starting to realize how hard it might be for people. In that them types of folks, the hustlers, are not everybody. Not every artist is like that, and not every artist should be like that. It's a very high stress, risky strategy. You know, it's very hard when you're doing that type of life. It's hard to have relationships. It's hard to have partners because you have to be so all in on your career.
Yeah.
Now, I've speaking to other artists who look at people like that, and I class myself like that. You know, I'm always working on in my spare time, and they see that and they feel pressured. They're like, "Oh, well, if they're being like that, then I need to be like that." And
Yeah.
this whole industry is catered towards climbing a ladder. You know, if I'm a junior, oh, junior's not good. I should be a mid. And if you're a mid for a couple of years, it's like, oh, I need to be a senior. There's this element of I need to climb built
Yeah.
into the career path.
Yeah.
And these guys who want, you know, who are climbers, love it. They thrive. That's why they when they hit the industry at like 18, they go and they fly because they're programmed and their brain works in a way where it's how do I climb this ladder most efficiently.
Yeah.
But not everybody's like that. You know, some people just they want to make art. They enjoy their job. They do their job. They're
Yeah.
happy. They go home. They play all the games they want to do. They all that kind of stuff. Is that another problem to it that the career actually the whole career path is tailored towards them types of people, and then it puts pressure on the artists who are not like that. And like I said, I used to be pig-headed about this. I used to be like, no, just work hard. Like it's not difficult. Like now I'm watching people a bit more. I'm like, not everybody's like this. It's not fair to expect anybody to be like this. And that's what I've sort of been thinking about a lot recently.
Yeah.
There's a lot there.
No, it's fine. I think it's like, um, yeah, not everybody's going to want to push, right? You know, but if you, I think we talked about this in the other podcast, but like, uh, again, like this industry is not like, okay, I'm going to go work at the car dealership as a mechanic and people are buying the car, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm fulfilling a role, like I'm maintaining something that there's already a demand for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this industry is the entertainment industry is like you're here to market yourself, right? And impress people and work really hard. And I think that's a big thing for people to like adjust to. I know I had to, and to figure that out. The industry definitely caters to people like that who are out there working really hard. Um, but there's no better way to show that you're like really talented and a hard worker, right? Than by putting it out
Mm.
there. And that's everything's very visual, and that's Instagram and ArtStation and all that stuff, right? And so um, I don't know what to say about that. Like, there's a lot of people that I think that's kind of what part of my tweet was about, right? Is that at some point you are not young anymore and you have a family, and
Mm.
it's not fair to expect that of people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you said something about like them being hustlers and they're trying to climb,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you climb too quickly you'll find you got nowhere to go. You know. And so I think that's something that's interesting as well.
Well, it's also I think if you climb to, and this is from personal experience. I mean, it's science to be proven that you know you don't actually finish developing as a person like emotionally, mentally until you're like 30.
Right.
So it's like, okay, I'm gonna do
Exactly.
all this climbing,
Yes.
and I'm gonna progress through these roles,
Right.
but I've not actually finished growing myself as a person yet.
Right.
And I mean, so I experienced lead at Decagon. I experienced principal at Live 5, and looking back, I didn't do a good job. And that's not like, you know, it is just the nature of the beast of what it was at the time. But I'm like, as a person, I wasn't in a good place to do it. And now I even just a couple of years later, I'm like, yeah, if I had a second crack, I probably would have done this. I would have done this. And I'm thinking, all I can think is, like I said, the hustlers are climbing, but they're also still grown as individuals. And I think that's why when you get to like, you know, by your 30s, it's like, okay, well, what about my relationships, my friends, my family? You can't. I mean, okay, some people do, hustle their whole lives, but it's like they're one in a million. Most people still want to have a life outside of a career, and you sort of alluded to it. You can't keep up with all these tools and be the person to like. It's very hard to keep up with all the tools and stay
Yeah.
relevant with this industry
Yeah.
without doing the hustling. And it's like, but
Y-
the industry expects it.
Yep. Yep.
And it's like, what are you meant to do? Like, it's a catch-22. I stop hustling. Okay, I just quietly work away with my stuff, but all the stuff has driven me through my career so far. It's it's just such a catch-22. Like,
No,
and again, it's no
it
problem.
totally is.
And there's no fix to it. Like, again, it's such an insurmountable problem. It's like,
Well,
what's the fix?
I think that, you know, the reason I brought up that craft thing is because that person or persons, that team would have the time at the day job and
Mm,
then be able to train people in house. Like that just doesn't happen. And it's really rare, right? And so I think that would like maybe like switch the incentives to do that, right? Like you might say, "Oh, well, I'm looking forward to what the craft team." I'm just making this up, right? Like I don't know
mm-hmm,
what you would call it, but they're going to come out with like some cool training on this thing and like we're going to go in and like watch and get taught, right? And so
mm-hmm.
I don't know, I think that could be really cool. Like um whether that's actually in-house people or they bring somebody in, but more on the job training is good in my opinion. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
pretty rare, but I definitely think it could help, like take that pressure off to like do so much at home.
Yeah, so essentially they keep up with the newest tools in the 9 to 5, not in their own time. Like at the
Right.
moment, all of the keeping up is done in your own time right now.
Yeah. That's
That
how it
makes
is for
sense.
me. It's how it's always
So,
been for me. Yeah.
so I'm a studio manager, or I'm like an art lead,
Yeah.
and you, Josh Lynch, we're gonna make you craft expo materials.
Uh-huh.
You're gonna research the next big thing after substance designer, or like the next
Yeah.
big pipelines.
Yeah, because there's going to be something, right? Yep.
What do I what? So imagine we're a sports team. Our best
Right.
player isn't playing. Michael Jordan isn't playing. He's off looking at strategies. As a purely managerial point of view, it's like, well, I want my star player in the game. I want him making the art. I want him creating the assets.
Yeah.
You know, um, that would. It's like maybe maybe it's balance class. Maybe the R&D team is a combination of production and research. I don't know, but
I get
that
what you're
would be how I see
saying.
it.
Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying, right? And I think a lot of this is related, or the parallels are there to like being an athlete, right? Like you're like you work really hard for years to get good at your whatever, whatever your skill is, and then you're like, here, look at me, like, it's no different than like trying to show yourself off to a sports team in my mind, right? Like I really don't see a difference. And
Mm.
so yeah, I think it it's a little it's new, right? And I'm not like trying to spend the whole time of this call like trying to talk about the craft like training
No,
thing
no,
so
it's an interesting
much,
idea.
but I really think I wanted to like bring it up as a thing of like an alternative, right? Because you mentioned the pressure, and I definitely think that yeah, when you say, "Oh yeah, like my star athlete, I want him out on the field or whatever," right? I get that. But that star athlete has a lot of people around them helping.
Yeah.
And there's like, yeah, I don't know how else to think of it. Like when you put it in that frame of like a star athlete, I definitely think that the first thing I
Well,
think
there's a
is
lot of
like
parallels.
there's a whole team.
Yeah, there's from like I spent like, God, how long was it? For 5 years in professional sport. Like there is so many parallels between
Yeah.
this industry and sport. It's really uncanny.
Yeah.
Um, but where would this? So the only thing I'm thinking is at the
Yeah.
moment a lot of stuff's being front loaded.
Hmm.
So junior mid, or associate mid, elite, and senior kind of has remained rigid. But
Yeah.
the stuff after senior's been like they've been trying to fix things. So they've inserted expert or advanced. We've got obviously leads and principles, and we're talking about this craft thing. All of it is like front loaded past senior.
Yeah.
So I still think in order for this to work, we need to like move the levels meter down a little bit, and like have the senior come a bit lower down, or mid like a little bit lower down, and you spend longer in junior just to ease it off a little bit. Because I think the time scales are still super accelerated, and actually this is where the parallel to sport comes in. A sporting career generally in like say rugby is between 20 and 30,
Yeah.
and when people hit, and this is a real big issue in sport right now, when athletes retire because they've just been so all in on sport,
Yeah.
they've not developed themselves outside of it most of the time, and a lot of them face a lot of mental health issues. They go into depression because their life's essentially over once they retire.
Yeah.
Their
Their
whole
whole,
identity is gone.
yeah, their value system, their self-worth.
Exactly, and it's like okay, a similar kind of like what's the word evolution takes place when you get to senior. And I want to say seniors around about the late 20s,
Yeah.
30s mark. I think
Yeah.
that's a fair estimate.
Uh-huh.
You come to the same thing. You plateau. All that climbing, all that hustling you've been doing, it's like, oh, now I've got to completely move sideways and hustle in a completely different direction
Right.
if I want to go into one of these roles.
Yeah.
And it's like your whole identity's gone. Your whole because you're so unidimensional to get to the senior role in the first place. It's like, and that's why I'm digging this craft idea, because it's like you stay on the path in
Right.
order. I mean, okay, you have expert artists and advanced artists, but you know, not every studio adopts that. This is
Yeah,
like if you're talking industry wide.
you become like a you know so much about the skill set and the craft that you're like you know how like what is needed for a good workflow, right?
Hmm.
So you're like the role is so high level that you're like affecting the entire pipeline of the studio.
Hmm.
I think it's a for me it's like a hugely positive thing. Like when I think about it, I'm like I get pretty excited, right? Like I'm like, "Oh man, like that could have a huge impact internally on a team." Right? Of like,
Hmm.
really talented people. Um yeah, I think it could be I don't know, man. This is just I'm one person. But like that's something that I really think about a lot. And it might be just because I do so much teaching, but I'm like, man, like the when you when you have like the ability to have such a big impact, like it's but if you have like pressure of like having to produce tasks, I think that's where it gets a little stressed, right? So um yeah, I don't know.
Well, it's interesting to talk about like the teaching thing though. Like it's
Yeah,
something. I mean, I took something very seriously that Tim Simpson said once. He was like, if you've gained so much from the community, you should give back,
right.
like in some way or another. And could this potentially be a take it out of community perspective and put a new framework on it in that studio? You're a studio for a long time. You get into this craft role. It's about you giving back to the studio as well. This developed you into this point.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
Now, question. There's another. So this is on like another point, which is kind of difficult.
Uh-huh.
And I've seen some studios actually correct this quite well. So Leeds, we're going to talk about Leeds for a minute.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Um, I I see the whole you're great senior, now you're gonna be a lead, and because that's just for years that's been the natural progression. If you're a
Yeah,
good senior, you go
yeah,
lead, senior, lead. Well, now leads are becoming more managers. It's like we mentioned earlier, a good manager is they're like gold dust. And once you've had a good manager, you really appreciate good managers.
Yes,
Being a
for
good manager is
sure, man.
hard.
Yes.
It's difficult, and it's like, okay, just because you're a good senior does not make you a good lead.
Yeah.
Yet that's the path most people feel pressure to take.
It's sometimes the only one
Exactly,
at
and
a given studio anyway.
and some studios. So I've noticed this with Ubisoft. They've been very quick to put people into lead roles without necessarily going through the ranks, and that's because they acknowledge what the lead is, i.e., they're a manager. And if they see somebody who's a good manager, even though they're an artist, it's like, okay, this person's a very good manager. They'd be better suited to, managing. Um, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about,
Yeah.
is that something that people maybe need to get out of their head? Because like I said, for the whole past 15 years probably, like it's only been the past like few years, leads have really started evolving into like, okay, no, they're managers. Is there like a mindset shift that needs to take place where it's like, okay, you don't need to go senior lead, like that is not the only path now, or
Yeah,
is it? Is it?
I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to say, right? Is like, and you're saying it too, right? Like that it's you're sitting there and you're like, okay, well, my next thing is this. And some people might get really excited about that, and others are like, oh my god, I'm dreading that. But I think what could be really good about making the jump from like a senior or principal to lead is to like have a lot of support in that, from
Mm,
your leadership, right? And like training almost, because the thing is like when you make the jump from a content creator to a leader or manager, you're not like impacting um, the assets you make anymore, or the maps or whatever, right? Or the characters or whatever it may be. You're impacting people
mm.
and the studio in a big way, right? And so I think it's like I think it should be stated like, um, or not. I don't think I could stress it enough that like I've had huge leaps of growth from like really good managers in my career, or like people that guided me, right?
Hmm.
But I think it's pretty unfair that to just assume that you're like a really talented artist that you would just be a good manager. Like how
Mm.
like that equation just flips and you're supposed to just turn it on, and it's like, then that leads to like angst because that person is not happy, and then the team suffers, right? And then that's catastrophic, right?
Yeah,
And then people leave because they're not happy with their managers, right? So I guess
yeah.
what I'm
What's
trying to
that quote?
say,
Yeah, you leave managers. You don't leave
yeah,
jobs. You leave managers.
yeah. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is like a lot of people give bad raps to leads and managers, and I want to be clear, like I'm not here to try to do that at all. I'm
Hmm.
just trying to say that like it is it's a weird transition to just flip it, and I think there's a lot more support that needs to be given, and a lot more emphasis on the importance of a manager and like how that impacts somebody's career and the people around them, I guess.
I think something to bear in mind as well is when you take a
Yeah.
step into lead, and we're talking when the managerial leads, is that you almost have to let go of your ego. Like up
Yes.
until the point, like we're in the games industry because we want to make art, we want to make the best games, and we want everyone to know we made the best games. Now, managers are selfless, like they're team players.
Yeah.
They don't get applaudits. When the game ships, it's the artists that get applaudits. It's the the company. The managers are just ones that make sure the ship runs. Like producers, the producers make sure the games actually get made,
Yeah.
and they don't get applaudits. Now, I think that's one thing I did find, like when I went to lead a deco, is that you don't get to put your name. You don't get to be like, I made this. Like, look what I did. This is great. It's like, no, this you don't really get to do that. Like, unless you're more of a hands-on lead where you're actually doing the art. When you're doing the managing, it's like that's such a mental shift going from an artist where you're built on showing people why you're good. I can tell you why I'm good
Yeah.
because look at my art. To a
Right.
manager, and now I'm like, I you have to be selfless. I haven't. You can't peacock about what you've done. And that's a very big mental shift. And I know that's when I struggled with a lot, is that shit, I have nothing to show for the past 6 months worth of work. Like,
Yeah.
all I've done is manage people.
Yeah.
And that's tough. That was really tough.
Yeah, it is tough, man, and I appreciate the honesty there. Like I definitely think about that a lot, right? Like how I've seen this multiple times in my career or heard stories of this or just seen it firsthand where like somebody goes to be a lead and they did a really good job, right? Like they're really well respected and then something happens, right? Like they either need to move or like the studio they're at closes, no fault of their own, whatever. And then they go to try to find work and it's like they're thrown out into this job market that is expecting like, yo, where's your art station? And it's like, oh, I don't
Mm,
have one because I spent the last 2 years making sure this team did a really good job, right? And that, like, I think
mm.
that's where a lot of people hear stories like that and they're like really cautious to move into that role. You know what I mean? Because it's not you're
Yeah, 100%. I know
it's
what you
not
mean. 'Cause I've gone through it.
marketable, like you just said, right?
Yeah.
And that's tough. I don't think it's really fair because um, I'm trying to figure out how to say. So I watched this firsthand with somebody that I really cared about, and they did a really good job for me and the team we had, and I feel like they got the just watching them go through those things we just talked about was really tough, right? And so I like I remember that, and so like I'm like
Hmm.
sitting here thinking like about that, and that's tough, right? Like what do you do? Like, and then that person was like, oh, I'm gonna go work on my portfolio, and they have like nothing while all the
Yeah.
people they shepherded have all the portfolios. It's like, oh my
Yes.
God. And so one thing I want to say though is um, like I think that it is selfless to go to be a lead or a manager, right? And you have to have a different mindset. And I think that just like that in and of itself is a huge thing, you
Hmm.
know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's tough, bro. Like it's so uh, like emotional for me to think about all these things because I'm in this, right? I'm in this point where we're talking about all these things and I'm
Hmm.
watching the industry I'm in and I'm just like, okay, so like what, you have to be very selective with what you do and like how you're going to do it. And yeah, I don't know, man.
It's yeah, just back to the point of like put when you get to the you mentioned about your friend who's gone from leading now that I have to work on my portfolio. It's the exact same for me. A friend, close friend who's was doing the exact same like that. Okay, I need to work on my portfolio now.
Yeah.
Um, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's like it's almost like part of your portfolio as a lead. You want to say these are the people I led. Like
Yeah.
these because it's like I said, you worked there for 2 years. It's like what do I have to show for it? Nothing. And it's also there's an expectation from the industry. It's like, oh yeah, your portfolio isn't that great. Like, yeah, but these are the projects I worked on. Yeah, but what did you do? I led them. Like this project got made because of me. Like that's all. No, I didn't make the. I didn't hand make all these assets. But look, here's the team I had. Here's the artists,
Yeah. It's a different
and
skill set.
exactly. And like also people who are like this is people who just are born managers. There's a guy I used to work with called Oliver. He's from Bulgaria. He spoke like 5 languages. The guy was a beast at Live 5. He was a born and bred manager. Like he started as a programmer and then like then became like content manager and then he
Yeah.
ended up like being the producer for the whole studio. And he is them kind of born bred managers. He doesn't care about like all the bits to go into the games. Is like his badge of honor. The thing he wears his badge on is how well the game got made. Like in terms of timelines, when we have the retrospectives. Where did we go wrong? Where's there any
Yeah.
time we had to do overtime? That's where he gets his kicks. He's like, yeah, I managed it so well that it all stayed on track. No one had to do overtime. That's his like
Dude, that's a
it's
huge
strict.
fucking deal, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
when you
and not everyone's like
shepherd
that.
your
Like
team through
how?
all that, yeah,
Yeah, and you know how many people are wired that way? Like it's so rare. So
right.
it's like, okay, let's find these people. So okay, let's find these people who are wired to climb ladders to make great art, who are so one-dimensional to make great art. Then let's like combine that with them 1 in a million people who are so selfless that all they care about is making sure everyone gets their job done well, which don't exist, and people are like next to fairies, unicorns,
Yeah.
and it's like go do that job well, and that's your career. That's why I do think that's why there's a lot of angst. Like when you get to that point in your career, it's like it's so it's so like I need to be the best at this thing I've never done before.
Yeah, you know, I'm gonna talk about something here. So, like, I've got this mentor, right? I've known him
Mm-hmm.
for years, and this person used to be an environment artist,
Mm-hmm.
and they're now like in production. And when I met them, they were like hugely influential to me, like professionally and personally, you know? And I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that was like, well, it's so many things, you know, like it's they're uh they're just a good person, right? So they're trying to look out for you. They can speak your language, right? They know if you're like trying to like pull a fast one on them. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And but also like they on that flip side, they can help protect you because they know, oh, that takes this long for real, right? And this is what we're asking of the team. Like, are you prepared to do that, decision makers, whoever you are, right? So I remember like I asked this mentor of mine uh like a while ago, you know, I was like, hey, why did you stop becoming or why did you stop being like an artist, right? And his answer was just like, I wanted to have a bigger impact than making a map.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that like that stuck with me because that person literally like changed their skill set and they like let the art like all wash away because they were fully invested in that other mindset, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
what was key about it was they said that they did it when they were ready.
Yeah.
They like sought it out, right? And I think that
He was
that's
ready to put a
so,
pen down, kind of thing.
yeah, and like you're just I just found it so interesting, right? And now they're like off building teams, you know, and I'm like, oh man, that's so cool. You know? So I'm just trying to share that because or I wanted to share that because I think it's like really interesting that like line of thought and um that attitude of like I'm going to do like I'm fully aware of what I'm doing. I'm watching everything around me and I just want to have a bigger impact on the production, the studio and the people, right? And I just think that's so
Mm-hmm.
interesting. You know, like it's not like not everybody's going to want to, you know, switch their skill set. Like some you've invested, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in school, like, you know, many hours, like sacrifices in life to get your skills to where they are, right? But I just think it's really interesting and to go to be like a manager or like a leadership role is a big mindset shift. And like if you think like that you're going to do that and then go be like a shit hot artist all the time, it's super rare, right? Like something's going to have to like fall away. And I guess what I'm going with that is like as an industry, like that shouldn't be like you shouldn't be shamed for that because I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of people that do that, they're like, oh well, maybe they weren't a good artist and that's why they did that. Like that's extremely unfair to me, right? Like maybe you're just really you know, like maybe you want to go be a manager and like I don't know.
Well, he's doing it for right. He's doing it for we versus me, and it's like,
Yeah.
and to me, that's actually so. This comes back to like just leadership in general.
Right.
He's doing it for the right reasons. Like a lot of the time, like you people go into lead roles because they're just furthering their careers. It's like that's the next step for my career,
Right.
without thinking about the fact that, like I just said, it's we over me.
Right.
And I think that's part, it's these good, when you meet good leads and good managers, it's because they are natural leaders as well. Like
Yeah.
they naturally want to see the best for you. They want to help you
Right.
above themselves. Like their self interest in what they gain goes out the window. And that, but obviously they're rare because you do get leads who are in it for themselves, who are in it to further their own interests and careers. And each their own. You climb your ladder. But in my experience, the good leads I've had are the ones who are like, okay, like here's this idea, like this is what I think you should do. And then they let you go away with it, and then when you get the plaudits of, oh hey, that was a great idea, they don't chime in and go, yeah, well actually that was my idea. They let you have the plaudits,
Yes.
and to me that's like we're talking about like who was I listening to? Someone was talking about like successful people. We're going to call all these types of characters who climb a ladder and go into these positions successful, objectively. It's like they take pleasure in taking a talent, giving them an opportunity, and seeing that talent kill it.
Yeah.
Like that's the pleasure. That's the kick. It's, hey, I've got this. This young kid. I know he can be good. He's naive. He has a lot to learn, and growing that person and nurturing them and seeing them come through is probably one of the big satisfactions for them types of people who are, like I said, they're in it for the company, they're in it for the team, they're in it for the people. They're in it for the right reasons. And then when you get, the bad thing is when you get the people who come in who are in it for furthering their careers, that's when I think you tend to hear these horror stories of like bad leads, or like bad manager. Oh, puppy. When you have these bad leads and managers.
Right.
Shaz has brought him in because she's gone out. That comes in when, if this dog starts crying, I'm going to kill him. Don't get puppy, Josh. It's a really bad idea.
Oh, we have one, man.
Hey, yeah, I'll hold you. Come here. Ah! Yeah, I think that's where the horror stories come in. Is when you get people go into leader managers for the wrong reasons. Like your example you're talking about with your mentor, he did it for the right reasons.
Yeah,
and that's why he's so good. He's brought you through. That's why he was a good person. I feel like it's because he did it for all the right reasons.
Right. Yeah, I think. I think it's really. I think there's something there with it, right? Like, yeah. I had something else I wanted to say, and then I forgot. But yeah, I think it's like, again, like, I'm not trying to come on here to be like super negative. I just wanted to be honest, because like I think that the thing I talked about resonated with a lot of people, and I don't think it's talked about enough openly or whatever. And I want to, like the thing I really wanted to make sure to talk about was like that there's like a good manager is really important, and like they shouldn't be thought of as like this I don't know, one trick pony type thing, you know what I mean? Like only good for that studio or whatever, you know what I mean? Like the impact it's just hard to market it.
Yeah.
Right?
Or maybe it's hard to market because we're, from the artist point of view, we're so used to showing rather than telling.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know
how like you watch like American, like the NFL, American football, and they say like, oh, here's this coaching tree, and like here's this head coach who's been around for decades, and then here's all the assistants that trained under them, and then like you can kind of see like they were all influenced by this like select few group of coaches that they were all mentored by, and then like they all go off and like have super successful careers. Like some of them win championships and all that stuff. And I just find it really interesting. Like that's a marketing, like that's a way to market that, but like, I don't know how you calculate that or whatever. It's definitely something different.
I think it's probably down to the, 1 second, I want to kick the dog out.
That's all right.
Sorry, I keep dog out. He's being too loud.
That's all right,
I
buddy.
think I think part of it's down to you managers of sports teams. They
Yeah.
show the players they managed. Hey,
Yeah.
look how good I was. I brought these people through. I suppose a manager, it's like these are the projects I completed, and these are the people who are on them projects, and I brought them through.
Right.
I think that's the big difference to me.
Yeah, I think so, man.
Josh, I think this is my cue. This dog is so pissed off right now.
Yeah, dude.
We'll lead off with one question though.
Yeah, hit me, man.
I've asked you. You've been on twice. The past 2 times have been, what would you do differently? This one, let's look forward. What in this time next year? Where do you want to be? Like, what do you want to have done? Where do you want to, as a person, as an artist? Like next year, what's a goal?
Yeah, wow. Okay. I think that, man, over the next year, I want to learn, um, like, I think I want to learn some new software, man. I know that sounds like maybe a little ambiguous, but um, I want to bring in some new workflows into my repertoire to like grow what I'm doing. And I think some of that might be like more procedural things, because that's really where I see a lot of this stuff going.
That's fair. That's.
Yeah.
I actually look forward to see where you go with that. That's
Yeah,
gonna be
like I
exciting.
know that's pretty high level, but
No.
that's kind of like how I have to think about it. Because otherwise, like I like to let things kind of like happen naturally in a way, or like I see something and I'm like, oh, there it is. Like that's what really kind of gets me going. I also want to get better at scripting.
Really?
Yeah, because like that's just, man, I just think about it, like all these younger people that are in like school, they're growing up and they're like taught basic scripting, and they're like out there, man. And I don't, I didn't grow up with that. Right. And so like, that's just something to be aware of. And so many things that like I do in my job, or I see people around me do, like they excel because they can script a little bit more than me. They're not like amazing scripters per se, but they can do it way more than me, and their jobs are better for it.
That makes sense. I suppose, yeah, I have seen a few folks
So that's something
do
that's
some interesting
definitely
things.
on my mind, man. What about you?
Me,
Yeah, you, man.
I've basically shifted focus now. I just want to spend my 20s just being a solid senior artist. I have so much to learn, and like, I've had a taste of like principal and lead, and I'm like, okay, one day, but I still have a lot I need to sort out on my end. I
Yeah.
need to grow a lot more as a person, as an artist, more as a person. Really, I'm focusing on.
Yeah, that makes sense, dude.
I'm quite disagreeable, competitive, pig-headed, and it's through. I've said this a few times when I was a deco watching. There's a guy called Javier Benitez. He's a lead there, and I watched him conduct himself, and the way he conducted himself, and I'm like, I don't have the ability to do that yet. I'm very quick to jump into confrontations and arguments and hash things out in the short term. And I watched him the way he navigated it, and he was just very understanding, empathetic, kind.
Okay.
And I was like, I don't have that component yet. I'm thinking about it more. I'm getting better at it, but yeah, I'm looking to. I mean, me being being with, let's say, counterplay, I'm gonna grow a lot as an artist anyway. Being around people like Tim and Enrico, and Evan, I think the bit which I need to focus on is me as a person. The art stuff will take care of itself, like in my eyes. I just worry. I don't worry, but I'm just aware of what I'm like to work with. With outside of like counterplay, so that's all I'm really focusing on. Being a. It sounds so cliche, corny, but being a better person.
No, I honestly like. I think I appreciate the honesty there, dude. Like, I think like that's what's funny. Like in a way, we were just talking about this the whole time. Of like being aware and like how to be a better person is what translates into a lot of those other higher level roles, right? And so I think that that's awesome, man. I wish more people would do that.
Well, it's hard. It's hard. Like I can understand why people like it. It's a it's a shock when you look at you look in the mirror and like it's literally I saw the way it was watching how I do that, which was the wake up call for me that I needed to because I was like, well, how would I have handled that situation? I would have done this. I would have argued. I would have got angry. I would have
Yeah,
got into an argument. And I'm like, that was when I was just sort of like, I'm not the best person I can be. And that's not like me super beating myself up because sometimes it's good to be that type of person. Sometimes you need them type of people, but not always. And it's
yeah.
like I don't want to be the one. I don't want to be a one trick pony where everyone knows me for um, being the one who fly off the handle when someone does something wrong. Like that's not a good thing
I
to have
hear
to
you,
take to
dude.
myself.
Yeah,
And people don't like that. Like people don't like looking at themselves normally and going, "What's wrong with me?" Like
yeah.
everyone thinks that they're fine and they just need to improve their hard skills, but it's very hard to look in the mirror and go, and it's not that I don't like the person looking back at me, but I know the person looking back at me isn't emotionally mature yet, and I'm trying really hard to be aware of what I say and do
Well,
with people.
yeah. I think that that's really important, man. Like so much, like I mentioned a little bit ago, so much of those roles are like it's not so much about being like really good modeler or whatever, sculptor or whatever it might be, but you have to have like really good soft skills. And I think that um, some people just have that naturally, and some people need to work on that. And I guess that's kind of like what is really interesting to me, right? Is like uh, how do you approach that? Like how who do you go to for that? Like like is it a studio resource that you lean to, or do you seek it out personally? I'm not asking you specifically, it's just more of a general thing, right? Like how do you go about that? And I think that that's really interesting, man.
I think it'd be very hard for a studio to facilitate that sort of stuff. Um,
Right.
I think it's having. I think the only thing is having them close circles, man. Like them people you could talk to and who will tell you what you
Yeah,
need to hear.
I
So, for
know,
example,
man.
like Jeremy. Jeremy, I know I can speak to at any point, and he'll tell me the God's honest truth. Like if I've done something dumb or said something dumb, he'll call me out on it, and like
Yeah.
I need that. And I have some close, groups of friends, like artist friends, from Decagon days, from guys I met up at the meetups. I'm like, if I said something or I do something, they will say when it's good. They'll give you the plaudits when it's good, but they'll also tell you when it's the wrong thing. You've done the wrong thing, or that's not good enough. I remember I posted a material, an ice material about a month or so ago, and they were like, "You need to re-render that, dude. You can do better. Like this isn't up to your standards."
Yeah.
Most people just comment and like, go, "Oh, good job," and that's it. Um,
Yeah.
they were like, they cared enough about me and my career to say, "That's not good enough. You should redo that."
Yeah.
And I did, and I went back and redid it, and I'm glad I did it. But like, yeah, that's the type of stuff I think that helps develop them skills is having being around them people willing to be looking out for your best interests
Right.
rather than just keep you happy in the short term.
Right. Yes. I agree, buddy. Yeah, man. The tough love.
Exactly. All right, Josh, we're gonna wrap up, man. Why is it every time you come on, like I'm really good that we're ending, or we gotta end? So you're gonna have to come up for a fourth one at some point.
Well, I just, I know we're wrapping up here, but I wanted to say thanks for having me on so many times, and um, that, like this topic, I understand might be like a little sensitive for people, and it's a little sensitive for me to talk about it, right? But
Hmm.
I think it's hopefully it helps someone out there think about things or impacts them in a positive way, or if they're like thinking about being a manager and they're nervous about it, that they shouldn't think it's the end of the world, right? Like give it a shot, maybe, because you could impact a lot of people in a really good way. So,
Yeah, it's putting that perspective out there and that frame of mind, which
right.
maybe people don't think about immediately. Um, but yeah, dude, thank you. I appreciate you coming on so much. It's been a blast talking. Everyone, I'll catch you next week on the next episode.